So I will speak here on the microphone so that those attending online can hear us. It's a great honor and great pleasure, really, to be here tonight introducing Christine Lansdale Willis, her lecture on the 50 years as a potter. A great event. We are really very lucky that Christine has accepted our invitation to come to the BSA and give a lecture during this year that she celebrates this, the 50 years of her career. And we really, when I heard that she is preparing an exhibition for the Center of, for the Study of Modern Greek Pottery, with Nikos Liaros, we grasped the opportunity, and thank God she said yes. Maria will give you some more details about visiting the exhibition on Saturday for a guided tour by Christine. But I would like to say a few things about Christine, not really to say things about her life or her career as people usually do in introductions, because this is what she is going to do, and she will do it much better than myself. I would like to say what is our common with Christine, why this lecture here at the BSA, and why me here introducing Christine. First of all, I'm an archaeological scientist myself. So an archaeologist who is specializing in ceramics, as a number of other people here in the audience. And we use both our archaeological training, but also scientific techniques in the study of pots and potters in the past. And we do this as members of the Fitch Laboratory, the Fitch Laboratory for Archaeological Science that was established here at the BSA 50 years ago. So we share, as Fitch team, two things with Christine: our love and dedication to pottery, but also celebrating a 50th anniversary, because in 1974, it wasn't only the year that Christine's career started, it was the year that the Fitch Laboratory was established. And it's our love and dedication for pottery, our focus on understanding potters from outside, that has brought us close with Christine. And although I first met Christine many, many years ago when I was an archaeology student through a very good common friend, Professor Stelios Andreou from the Aristotle University, who took us to see how pottery is really made and talk with a real potter. And Christine was there in her workshop at the beginning of her career, her workshop at the American Farm School in Thessaloniki. What a nice starting point for us. And of course, I didn't know at that time that many, many years later, I was going to collaborate with Christine, this amazing potter. So it was again through Stelios Andreou, a couple of years ago, that this collaboration was launched. And I think Christine will say a few things about this collaboration in her presentation. But what I would like to say, as from our side, is underlining how important such collaborations are for us, is that we as archaeological scientists studying ceramics, we have a toolkit full with different tools that we acquired during our training as archaeologists, but also as scientists. So we use scientific and archaeological methods and techniques in understanding pottery in order to approach ancient potters and understand how they made pottery, but also what was their role in the society they lived across time and space. And what is really important is for us to understand how materials and techniques behave in reality. So we do quite a lot, most of us, experimental work. So try to play with materials and techniques and see how they work. And of course, the best opportunity is to do this in collaboration with contemporary potters who have already the experience and the knowledge of materials in practice. And in this way, these potters, like Christine, become both the item of our study, because they are potters living in specific societies, but also our collaborators, very valuable collaborators. And this is the kind of work we're doing with Christine, trying to experiment on our study of potters and pottery in the wider area of Thessaloniki, back in prehistory. But as a potter, I would like to say 2 words for Christine as a potter. And something I've realized, really, although I've known her for a couple of years now, when I visited her exhibition last Monday, and you will go to see, some of you have already seen the exhibition, is a small selection of her really large amount of work. And I've seen already more of these at her home in Lakia. But what I was struck by was the plurality and the diversity of her work. So Christine is somebody who has tried many different things. She has explored and experimented a lot. And she loves doing this, I think, and she continues doing this, thank God. Continue, Christine, yes. And something else, which is, I think, very important, and I've only started understanding, having a feeling about this, is that Christine is not only a good and an important potter, but she is, I think, also a teacher of pottery making. And this, I don't know, maybe this is more important even. And I've started meeting, as I'm entering the world of potters, I've started meeting a lot of people who tell me, oh, I was a mathetes, a trainee of Christine. So she likes passing her knowledge and expertise to the younger generation. And as I've had a slight experience with this, being in groups of young people trying to learn from her, I can say that what is really amazing is that Christine is not there as a teacher, as an authority, but is there as somebody who wants to learn from you too, who, you don't think that you know much to give her, but also share and do things with you. And she has such an enthusiasm. So I will stop talking. I can continue, I think, forever, but I think it's time to see what Christine has prepared to show us about her 50 years as a potter. Christine?
Thank you very much, Vangello. I'm just wondering if you all can hear me. Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you. And is there anyone in our audience who does not speak English? Because I was going to give this talk in English, or I can be bilingual if that works. Thank you so much to the BSA for inviting me, for my friendship with Vangello. And I just want to say as an introduction that I am a potter. I'm not an archaeologist. So if I say something that's not academically correct, talk to her. So several years ago, I had a lovely, lovely young student who came to my class. This was pre-COVID. We all think pre-COVID and after COVID. And her name was Eleftheria, and she used to ride her bike, and she was really animated and very focused on what she was learning. And one day in class, she just briefly mentioned, oh, by the way, my aunt works in the Fitch laboratory in Athens at the BSA. And I'm like, my jaw dropped, and I thought, really? I want to meet your aunt. So be careful what you ask for, because about a week later, my phone rang, and it was our mutual friend, Stelios Andreou, saying, hey, guess what? Vangelia Kyriadzi is here in Thessaloniki and she wants to meet you. Can she come out to the studio? And I thought, okay, this is, things happen the way they're supposed to happen. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story and why I'm standing in front of you today. It has to do with my grandfather, who came to Greece in 1925 as a young American. And I'm pushing enter and it doesn't want to go. So, oops. Didn't I push this? Yeah, try it. Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. Whew. This is the YMCA building in Thessaloniki, and it was, my grandfather was very instructive. He came in 1925. This is a picture of him on the right, pointing his hand, and was very instrumental in helping to have this building built. It's a huge center for Thessaloniki. And so my father was 6 months old, but grew up in Thessaloniki, so he spoke Greek. And then in 1948, when he was working in the US Navy, he was asked to return to Greece and work as an interpreter for the Marshall Plan. A year later, he went back to the United States. He married my mother, Elizabeth Krihak, who had never eaten garlic in her life. And they moved to Greece, and 1955, I was born, and also my father became the director of the American Farm School. If you want to read more about him and his life, this is a wonderful book that was written by David Willis, my husband. And this is also a photograph of my mother, who came to Greece as a young bride. And I see Katerina laughing in the audience because she was a student at the American Farm School when my parents were both there. So I grew up drinking out of handmade mugs and eating off of handmade plates because my mother loved to buy them. And I never realized, I never made the connection that actually somebody made those things that we were using until 1972, when I went with my friends in high school. We went to the island of Sifnos just by chance, and I met my very first teacher, Mr. Vasilis Lukianos. This is, for those of you who have never been, Sifnos is a beautiful, beautiful island. Because of the quality of its clay, many, many potters, 200 potters used to be on Sifnos. This is a picture of my teacher and his kick wheel. And he was so kind because he used to take his lunch break every day from 12 till 1. And he would say, Christina, if you want to sit down at the wheel, you can. So I used to play around with, and that was my first contact. He used to take his donkey and go up into the mountains, fill the kafasia with clay and bring it back. This is an old photograph that shows how those potters used to live. They made their pots and then would send them off in these boats back to Marousi, where they would be sold, because back in the 60s and even the 70s, we all ate from these important pots. When I first went to Sifnos, I spent the night in this monastery, Chrysopi. It's just a beautiful place. And then finally they said, you're really not allowed to stay here. So when I graduated from high school, I ended up going to Middlebury College in Vermont. And I came back to the American Farm School, where I did a year-long apprenticeship, and I learned to weave. And then I went to Benghazi, Libya, where I taught English for several years. And from Benghazi, I went to the University of California in Santa Cruz. But I should say that that was in 1978. And my grandparents at that time lived right down the street on a road called Spefsipu, which I think is just like several blocks away from here. So this was my home away from home. Whenever I would fly in and out of Athens, I would stop just right down the street. After I graduated with a degree in ceramics, I flew to London. And I was always poor. You didn't have a lot of money. I still think I had a little bit of money left from when I was teaching English in Libya. I bought a bicycle and I rode my bicycle from London down to Greece and took some time. This is a photograph of my studio. This changes all the time because pots come and they go. And I would like to speak to you a little bit about the alternative firing techniques that I use. And a lot of my work is experimental, so a lot of it breaks in the process, but you will see that I start on the left-hand side. The pots are white and orange, and then after I put them into a fire, they come out black and orange. This is a process called dolce raku, and it's something I'm still striving to work for and to get, and it's elusive, but gives me the results that keeps me searching. And as Magello said, we love to experiment, and that's what we do as potters. I use a lot of natural materials when I fire. This is firing on the left-hand side using seaweed. I use a lot of chicken manure, sawdust. And on the right-hand side is a piece that, if you come to my exhibit, is in the exhibit that I made with using a piece of tandela, of lace. So, and this is just a little video for you to just see the process.
Part 3 of the video, part 1 was when we put the white terra sigillata on this pot. And part 2 is I put some slip resist. And now in part 3, I'm putting a little bit of red terra sigillata over the resist. So you're going to see very quickly how the pattern is going to come through. This pot is going to be fired twice. It can be fired once in an electric kiln, and it'll go to 980 degrees. When I take it up, I'll polish it a little bit and get rid of some of that. Obviously, the wax is going to burn out.
So the pot comes out of the kiln. It's about 620 degrees and goes into this metal container where there's sawdust. And so maybe I lose about between 40 and 60% of my pots in the process, but the ones that do come out and are still intact and whole are very beautiful. This. So you can also hear us coughing a little bit in the background in this video. So there's a lot of playing with fire and yeah, that's us. This is one of my favorite pieces that did come out intact and very beautiful. So this is a kiln that we built ourselves. It's made out of ceramic fiber. In this particular case, you can see that we're using shredded newspaper instead of the sawdust like in the previous. Basically, you can use anything that's flammable, that's going to create the carbon that goes into the pores of the clay and stays there, makes it black. No?
Yeah, it's all good.
So this is a plate I made. Plates are considerably more difficult just because it's a larger surface area. That was my daughter Annie. So the other thing is that we also have to wait for a sunny day. You don't want to do this in the pouring rain. This is another technique, and again, I have one of these pots on display where we use feathers and horsehair. This pot is at about 650 degrees, so that's quite hot. You see how beautiful the feather burned right on? And I'm pretty sure that there's a horsehair also. The reason these are called alternative firing techniques is that you can't ever replicate the same pot. You can never do this twice. Let's just say I can never do this twice. Maybe somebody's more magician. So you can see how this one crackled as it came out of it was just way too much thermal shock.
Yes.
It's a little bit hard also on the fingers because that pot is really hot. Well, you can tell because the feather just. And this is the horsehair. You hear the sound of how it gets burned on, and it just leaves that lovely line in the pot. It's quite random, the decoration, but then afterward it's quite lovely. And here we just put a little bit of sugar. And the sugar makes these sparkle effects. At some point, the pot cools down so much that the horsehair won't burn. So it's a very fine temperature range in which it'll work or it won't work. So these are some pieces that I made just playing around with sculpture because mostly I do wheel thrown work. I made this for an exhibit that was in 2012 to commemorate the 100 years of the apelευθérωση of Greece. Forgot the word in English. Freedom. When Thessaloniki got its freedom from the Turks in 1912, and we had a big celebration. So what I did was I went around, these are all different stamps from the post office. So you can see how Salonika would have been written in French, Salonique in Russian, and in Arabic. We also had a very large Jewish population. And the middle window is my representation of the city walls, the White Tower, the Macedonian dancers. This is an old window that was taken out of Princeton Hall at the American Farm School. And Princeton was built by refugees. And they had a renovation in 1985, and they were going to throw all the windows away. And I said, no, wait a minute, I'll take them. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. And then slowly over the years, I used them in different art things. Now I'll tell you a little story about the octopus because this is where I've been swimming since I was 3 or 4. And about 5 years ago, an octopus came and swam right up to my feet and turned this incredible, beautiful blue color right in front of my eyes, and then switched over and went to the other foot. And I thought, this octopus is talking to me and trying to tell me something, and I'm not really sure what it is. And so the first octopus I ever made was didn't look like an octopus at all. So I worked and worked and worked on this I actually love the octopus theme and what it stands for, and perhaps our awareness around how smart an octopus is, and that it's an animal that has feelings. So I've made them in many different colors and sizes and shapes, and they're kind of all over. So this is another part of what we do. We run camps in the summertime, and we spend a lot of time digging clay, different clay from all over everywhere. This is my son, Bruce, and one of my students, Yannis Tangidis. And we were digging this clay in order to build an ancient Greek kiln. Yanni was my student in 1981, and you can see we took the clay over to the right. We've mixed it up with straw and water, and we're starting to build the base of the kiln. This is where the firebox is, and then the floor of the kiln. So the pots would be sitting on here, and the fire comes in from down below. This is how we finish it. And as Evangelio says, I love working with students and people who are interested in learning. So this was Zozo, who's our cook at that particular camp, and these are my students. We're up in Chalkidiki. They're having a little relaxed break time. This was a hot tub, but we fill it with cold water because in July we don't want it to be with hot water. And just a small little cabin up on the hills. Then where do I get my inspiration from? I think mostly from going to museums and seeing things. This whole marriage that has been created recently with archaeologists and myself started several years ago with a fellow named Thomas Tsoukalas, and he brought me a fragment about that big, and he said, well, we think that fragment from 6,000 BC, because we're talking about in the caves of the lakes of the Peloponnesos, which is behind Kalavrita. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. It's well worth a visit. So I made these pots, depending on that tiny little shard that he gave me. And they're there, they're in the museum. And then this is where our story starts today, because I've been working with Vangelio Kyriatsi, with Evangelia Vliora, PhD, and Stelios Andreou, because they were working on this project, which is the Anthemounta Valley starts in Galatista above Thessaloniki and goes all the way down into the airport, happens to go right in front of where I live. So here we are digging clay samples with Professor Andreou and Evangelia. And here we have Timothée, who's also in the audience. And we just went all around and we're picking clay samples. And I'm very proud to show you this slide, because yesterday we visited the Fitch laboratory, and there on their top shelf, they had a series of clay samples that looked very much like we did here. So I think what we're all doing as potters and as archaeologists is trying to find, how did potters think? How did they create what they created 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago? So these are some of the clay samples. We tried to fire them to 700 degrees. I think we went 750, 850, and 950. And so it shows all the different colors and gradations. And here's our wonderful team. This is Evangelia Vliora on the left, and Andreas, Professor Andreou, and Evangelio, with her niece, Eleftheria, who's now working on the island of Serifos, and Timothée. And here we're looking at how some of these samples were fired. One of the things I'm trying to teach the archaeologists is how to use their hands, because usually archaeologists are very cerebral and academic. And so we're teaching them how to burnish. And you can see that the pot on the left-hand side is burnished, the pot on the right-hand side is not, so it becomes much more shiny. We used a lot the PhD manuscript that Evangelia Vliora had of her PhD thesis and tried to replicate some of their pottery. And this is how we thought maybe would the ancient Greeks have fired their pots in this way. So initially you have to preheat your pottery before you can put it into the kiln. The pot on the right, which is a red color, was made by Evangelia, and it's using our local clay. The pot on the left was made by me, and it's using an Italian clay from Colorobia. And here we are putting it into, we created our own little kiln, basically using shards and broken pieces, which is exactly what they would have done 3,000 years ago. However, you'll see now after the firing here, they're both inside. This is us. We're firing and burning olive branches. We also burnt the little apple tree behind, but it'll come back. And then the next day when we opened it up, you can see that the Italian clay did not withstand that thermal shock. And I was very proud to say that our local clay from Lakia, which is a much rougher and open fabric, made it through the firing. We also put some of the little pots inside. Recently, in 2020, my son Bruce got a phone call from a friend who said, "Hey, I'm opening up a restaurant in Thermi, and would you like to make all the plates for the restaurant? We'll need about 400. And he said, "Oh, sure." And he hung up the phone. "Hey, Mom, can we make 400 plates?" Yeah, I said, "Oh, that's not so easy to do." But that was the birth of Willis Ceramics, which is our family business. I'm very, very proud that this is my daughter, Annie, who helps in making the plates. And this is Bruce. And it's very nice because we can also employ our students, our young students who want to learn and apprentice and see what production work is like. This is our studio. These were some pieces that we made for a hotel on the island of Skiros that she wanted these lamp shades to go over the bar. It's a very upscale hotel. And once we made them and delivered them and they hung them up, she called a few days later and she said, "You know, they also make sound in between them when the wind blows." And so I thought, oh, what a lovely thing. So you have sight and you have sound coming out of our pottery. This was the reception of a large hotel on the island of Crete, where you can see we're using a lot of the pit fire pieces. It's a really beautiful piece behind the reception hall. And these pieces were made for the island of Kefalonia. Mostly you will see that the Willis ceramics pieces are for functional use. So this was a hotel from Crete that sent us the picture on the left and said, "This is the carpet in our hotel. Could you make us some pots that would look like the carpet?" So we made the pots on the right, and they were very pleased with the result. This is Bruce working on a piece of something that just came up recently. Is a big order for a restaurant opening in Sofia in Bulgaria. And they asked us also to make 2 large pieces in addition to about 500 plates. So it was a lot of fun working on something very, very different. This is Bruce and Andy, who have been fantastic in helping me. And basically, I believe a lot of what Vangelios says, that it's important for us as teachers and as creative artists to think about how can we create community around our work. I find that today in the people who come to my classes, sometimes I have the chief financial officer of 5 large hospitals. So when he comes to my class, he's just, let's just relax and let's get into the zen of creating something with clay. It's important for us as humans to learn how to work together. And I think clay is one of those few mediums that helps us to slow down a little bit and perhaps gives us a little bit of hope for our future. And one of the joys I have in working right now with the students from the Kendro Meletis Neoteris Keramikis, which is where my exhibit is just watching those young people come and enjoy what they're doing for 3 hours in the middle of a busy day. So I want to thank you very much, all of you, for coming. I want to thank also Maria for inviting you. For those of you who want to come on Saturday morning, it'll be a pleasure to take you around and show you. I woke up this morning and thought, I don't have a single picture of my exhibit, but so you have to come and see it because I forgot. So that's what I had to say. I hope it was interesting for you, and thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's been a very, very nice talk to follow, and lots of interesting things. I wonder if you have any questions, comments for Christine, Rebecca?
I'm just listening to you. So please carry on, is my first question. The other thing I wanted to say is that the whole process of making pottery is very similar to what we do when we get kids who, or adults, or other people who may have learning problems or mental health difficulties or problems with substance abuse, that kind of mindfulness and well-being that they get out of handling already made properly too, or into pottery. And I love that idea of slowing down, that concept, and we start calling it slowing down.
I did work for 10 years in the Chamber of Analysis. It's called Archaeologist. In oh, I have to talk to you. Otherwise, people online can't. Okay, I'm sorry.
I did work for 10 years in a rehabilitation center called Anthemounta in Thessaloniki. And it was a great joy for me to see people, especially stroke victims who felt like they were handicapped and they were never, ever going to be able to do anything again in their lives. And you give them a little piece of clay and they thought, oh, I made something. And the great joy that brings. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much for the show today. I would like to ask you 2 things. The first is in Notre Dame that show us that it is something action. You change the red black or the black. Do you think you that the carbon was only on the surface? I don't know how some was like broke, and you could see also intersection of the black, not just the surface.
That was an excellent question. The question is it on the surface of the pot, can I see if it's black or black all the way through? For the shards that I have that have broken, of course, I have many, the black goes all the way through the pot. So because I think it's coming out at 600 degrees, and so it's still very porous. It hasn't been vitrified. The clay hasn't been vitrified. So the black does...
And this was the last that was mentioned.
For that particular process, the Dolce Raku process that I use, the maximum temperature is 620 degrees. I find that if you go hotter than that, the orange will turn very dark and it doesn't stay bright orange. It gets burnt. And other alternative firings that we do, we can go up to 800, but like for the horsehair, it's a hotter temperature that we need to make the horsehair melt.
I'm wondering if when you do, I don't remember which example it was actually, but you said that, okay, you did the first firing in an electric kiln.
Correct.
I should remember now the example to be honest. But it was a second also firing, but it was an open firing the second one. I mean, my question is, if you have fire in an electric kiln, and then the sample, you have time to fire in an open firing. Do you think that in this case, you decrease the number of the broken bolts? I mean, this process, do you think that saves some of your bolts when you do the open firing?
So there's two different things there. One is my own personal work, which I fire in an electric kiln to 980 degrees because I want it to be strong and I want it to be vitrified. And so I think it does help a huge amount then when I refire it and do the process that I showed in the barrel with the prionidi and the sawdust. The second kind of firing where we use the open firing, those pots were raw, because we're trying to replicate the way somebody would have fired 3,000 years ago. That's our purpose. So we reached, I think, about 850 degrees in the open fire. Did that answer the question?
Thank you very much.
I think so. Anything else? You can ask me a question not about pottery.
If I may, I
Yes.
was fascinated by the way you showed us in such a simple way how you turn mistakes or happenings that something breaking into such a creative form. You don't let anything go wasted almost. It's really therapeutic to see that. Amazing.
Yeah.
Showed us with the tracking of the amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've had so many mapes. How do we say that? Things break. Shit happens. It's like all part of being a potter. But we also have a really big cemetery of our broken pottery. And just 2 weeks ago, I had this young man who showed up and he says, I heard you have a cemetery of broken pots and I want to make a tabletop with shards. So I said, come and help yourself. Take as many as you want. Because, so, somebody's garbage is somebody else's that they find useful. Yeah. I hope he'll send me a picture of what he made. Because we have beautiful broken shards and they're all different colors and different shapes and you can do whatever.
We have a question online.
Okay. Where do you live?
Is this how Athenian black figure pottery was made? Do we know for sure?
Oh, that is an interesting question. No, I don't think that Black Athenian pottery was made in the way that I showed because they didn't have an electric kiln to fire it in first. And so the theory about how Black Athenian pottery was made is that they had, like that ancient Greek kiln that I showed, we were building halfway through on at La Montanita. They had a kiln and they took the kiln up to a certain temperature, roughly 800 degrees. And then they closed all the openings of the kiln so that the smoke went into the pieces. And then they opened the openings and allowed oxygen to go back in, which turned the orange back into orange. That's the theory of how ancient Greek pottery was made. So a little bit different from the process that I use. But a great question.
Can I have
My autograph?
question?
No.
Lots of photographs. Christine, we all see a kind of a boom now in pottery making, pottery classes, lots of potters. You walk in the center of Athens and you see lots of small pottery workshops and exhibition places. How do you see this? What do you think is the reason, and do you think there is a future there?
I think the reason is COVID. I think in COVID, everybody got stuck at home and had an opportunity to think through, what am I really doing with my life? And most people were spending way too much time in front of a computer, and they wanted to go back to that. I think I was having that conversation with a young man next to Timothée about, we want to go back to how we use our hands. And when I was in the 80s and in the 90s, our work as potters just went right down. It was very hard to maintain your studio. There were a lot of expenses from the government that said you had to pay huge amounts of TV. And I know a lot of my friends and potters who shut down their businesses. But since COVID, I think more and more you're seeing people who are interested in being creative and in working with their hands, and also working in community. So to take a class where you can be 10, 15, 20 people, you get to meet new people and share ideas and still work together. It kind of goes back to that basic thing of what we had as women, and we used to embroider beautiful things in the 20s and the 30s. We lost that a little bit, but I think people are hungry for it. I see it also in children. A lot of children are being taught ceramics. My greatest disappointment in Greece today is that it's not taught. You cannot study ceramics in any university. So you can go to Turkey. There's 5 universities where you can get a degree in ceramics, or you can go to California like I did, but nowhere in Greece can you get a degree in ceramics. You can get a degree in archaeology, so maybe the archaeologists will put in a plug for also teaching ceramics in their schools. I don't know. It's in high school, especially in the United States, ceramics is a very important class that people take as an elective. And many of those young people go on and become really, really good potters because they saw it when they were 15, 16, 17 years old. We teach ceramics at the high school level at the American Farm School, and it's very, very popular. We have about 20, 25 kids on a Friday afternoon when they could be going home and doing other things, but they come to pottery class.
And talking about you've talked to us about the Willis ceramics. So do you see more and more people wanting to use ceramics in their life? I mean, is there a growing demand for functional ceramics? Because we went through a
big dip.
A big dip.
I think that as we're seeing also an increase in chefs and the kind of food that they are preparing, the chef wants to portray his food on a nice setting. And so it starts from there. It starts from the quality of the restaurant, which will pay attention to how the food is served. And that is becoming more and more popular. There's a very fun weekend coming up starting on Saturday and Sunday called Fired Up. I know that Yoria is taking part, and some of my other friends, even from Thessaloniki. So potters are coming together. I don't remember where. Κυψέλη.
Δημοτική αγορά, Κυψέλης.
Yeah, so if you want to go, either Friday or Saturday, it's a fun time to go and see what potters are doing. Yes.
Question, on the practical side, we're talking about a commercial or potential commercial operation where you're making plates and cups and mugs and things like that. How dishwasher safe are they? And this is a very practical thing. Nobody's going to buy used dishes every day unless they can wash them quickly and so on. But using modern technology against these techniques, now that they would have to be more modern techniques than the 3,000 years ago, I suppose. But if I had a pot that you made, or not a pot, but a set of plates, for example, would I be able to put them in the dishwasher, or is that just a no-no?
No, the answer is very much yes. You're talking to me and I'm like, I love my dishwasher.
You know, I can put back.
So it's very important to us that both are ware is always food safe and dishwasher proof. And so we fired at 1,240 degrees for the functional work that Willis Ceramics is making.
Oh.
Nothing, that's double the temperature of the 600 degrees I'm talking about in the, you wouldn't use my dishes that I make to eat with. They're completely and totally decorative, or you might want to put some dried flowers in them. The dishes we make though for restaurants, for someone to use in their house are very high fired, they're vitrified. The glazes are proven to be food safe. And we're very careful about, yeah, especially my son Bruce, who studied, he's a mechanical engineer, so he's looks very closely at those things. That was a great question. Because who wants to buy something you can't put in the dishwasher? Not me.